You ever wonder how fast respect disappears when people think you don't belong? Rain hammered against the police station windows hard enough to blur the blue patrol lights outside into streaks of cold color across the wet pavement. The automatic front door slid open with a tired mechanical groan as Naomi Brooks stepped inside, carrying a worn leather folder beneath one arm and a small overnight bag in the other. Water dripped from the edge of her charcoal trench coat onto the scuffed tile floor. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee, printer toner, and old cigarette smoke soaked into uniforms after too many overnight shifts. Two officers near the front desk looked up immediately. One of them, Officer Ryan Keller, leaned back in his chair slowly, eyes narrowing beneath the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. He was broad-shouldered, mid-40s, the kind of cop who carried himself like the station belonged to him more than the city did. Beside him stood Sergeant Mike Doyle, chewing gum with lazy confidence while scrolling through his phone. Ryan glanced Naomi up and down once before smirking toward Mike. "Delivery entrance is around back," he said flatly. Naomi stopped near the metal detector, calm despite the rainwater still running down her sleeves. "I'm not making a delivery," she answered quietly. Her voice stayed even, controlled, almost too controlled for someone standing alone in a station full of strangers after midnight. Mike chuckled under his breath. "Then you're definitely lost." A couple younger officers nearby laughed softly without looking directly at her. Naomi adjusted her grip on the folder, but didn't react. Outside, thunder rolled low across the Chicago skyline. Somewhere deeper inside the station, a radio crackled with dispatch chatter before cutting back into static. Ryan stood from his chair slowly, the leather creaking beneath him. "Visiting hours ended 2 hours ago," he said as he walked toward her. "So unless you're filing a complaint, you need to turn around." Naomi looked past him toward the bullpen offices upstairs where tired desk lamps still glowed through the glass. "I work here," she said. The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt longer. Then Mike burst out laughing. "You," he said. "Doing what?" Ryan's eyes dropped toward the folder tucked beneath Naomi's arm. "Cleaning crew." More laughter echoed from somewhere behind the front desk. Naomi could feel every stare in the room settling onto her face, her coat, her skin, measuring her before she had spoken more than 3 sentences. But her posture never changed. "First day?" Mike asked mockingly. "That's rough." Ryan stepped closer now, invading her space with the easy arrogance of a man used to never being challenged. "Listen," he said quietly. "People walk in here acting important all the time." Then his eyes locked onto the silver badge clip partially visible inside Naomi's folder. "But pretending to be law enforcement." His expression hardened. "That's not smart." Before Naomi could answer, Ryan reached forward sharply and knocked the folder from her hands. Papers scattered across the wet tile floor. A few slid beneath the benches near the wall. One page stopped face up near the desk, stamped with an official city seal partially smeared by rainwater. Naomi bent slightly to gather the papers without raising her voice. But Mike stepped forward first, placing his boot over one corner of the folder. "Hold on," he muttered with a grin. "Let's see what we got here." Ryan's hand brushed Naomi's shoulder as he moved her back a step toward the wall, not hard, but dismissive enough to freeze the room. A rookie officer near the coffee machine stopped smiling. The station suddenly felt quieter. Even the dispatch radio seemed lower now. Naomi slowly lifted her eyes toward Ryan. Calm, unshaken. Rainwater slid from a strand of dark hair near her cheek onto the collar of her coat. Then Ryan finally looked down at the paper lying near his feet, and the color drained from his face. Ryan Keller stared at the rain-soaked document near his boot as if the words printed across the page had suddenly changed languages. The station remained frozen around him. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, casting pale reflections across the wet floor where Naomi's papers still lay scattered like fallen cards. Mike Doyle leaned down first, grabbing the page before Ryan could react. His smirk faded almost instantly. The bold black lettering across the top reads City of Chicago Police Department. Beneath it sat an official mayoral seal and a transfer authorization signed less than 48 hours earlier. Mike's jaw tightened. Slowly, almost unwillingly, his eyes moved lower until they landed on the name typed across the center of the page. Captain Naomi Brooks, the new commanding officer assigned to Precinct 18 effective immediately. A cold silence rolled through the station. Somewhere upstairs, an old printer kicked on with a mechanical whine before stopping again. Naomi crouched calmly beside the bench to collect the remaining papers one by one, her movements steady despite the eyes fixed on her from every corner of the room. She did not rush. She did not glare. She simply smoothed the wet edges carefully against her palm before placing them back inside the leather folder. Ryan still had not spoken. The color in his face had shifted unevenly beneath the harsh station lights, somewhere between disbelief and something heavier he did not yet want to name. Naomi finally stood again, water dripping from the hem of her coat onto the tile beneath her shoes. Her cheeks still carried the faint red mark from where Ryan's hand had brushed her moments earlier, but her expression never changed. Calm, measured, controlled. The kind of calm that unsettled people more than shouting ever could. A young desk clerk named Emily sat frozen behind the reception counter, fingers hovering above her keyboard. She had heard rumors all week about a transfer coming from internal affairs. Nobody expected this. Nobody expected her. Naomi glanced briefly around the station lobby. Bulletin boards covered with outdated notices. Coffee stains baked into old paperwork. Officers pretending not to stare while staring anyway. She noticed the cracked clock above dispatch reading 12:17 in the morning. 15 years ago, she had stood inside this same building holding her father's hand after a neighborhood fundraiser downstairs in the community room. Back then, the station smelled newer, cleaner, safer. Her father, Officer Daniel Brooks, had smiled at nearly everyone who walked through those doors. People trusted him. Kids followed him down sidewalks during summer block parties like he was part teacher and part superhero. Then one winter night, he filed a misconduct report against another officer in the same precinct. 3 months later, he was suspended pending investigation. 6 months after that, he was dead from what the department called a stress-related heart condition. Naomi still remembered standing beside her mother at the funeral while officers avoided eye contact beneath gray February skies. She had been 23 years old, young enough to still believe honesty protected people, old enough to learn it sometimes painted targets instead. Mike handed the document back slowly, his confidence leaking away by the second. "Captain," he muttered awkwardly, almost choking on the word. Ryan finally stepped back once, shoulders stiff beneath his uniform. Naomi accepted the folder without triumph in her eyes. No anger either, just exhaustion buried deep behind discipline. Outside, rain rattled against the station windows while red and blue lights flashed silently across the empty street. Naomi looked toward the bullpen upstairs where tired detectives moved behind glass offices under dim yellow lamps. Then she spoke for the first time since the silence began. "I asked for no formal introduction tonight," she said quietly. "I wanted to see the station before the station saw me." Nobody in the room had an answer for that. The station never fully relaxed after midnight. It only changed shape. Conversations became quieter, footsteps slower, tempers shorter. Naomi Brooks could feel it the moment she stepped deeper into Precinct 18 behind the reception desk and into the main bullpen where detectives sat beneath pools of yellow desk light, surrounded by half-finished paperwork and cold takeout containers. The air smelled faintly of wet wool uniforms, old radiator heat, and burnt coffee left sitting too long on warming plates. Nobody spoke as she walked past. A few officers straightened in their chairs. Others suddenly became very interested in computer screens that had not changed in 20 minutes. Naomi carried her leather folder tucked firmly beneath her arm now, the rainwater slowly drying along the sleeves of her coat. She moved calmly through the room, but her eyes missed nothing. A cracked surveillance monitor hanging near dispatch flickered every few seconds. Evidence boxes sat stacked carelessly beside a supply closet with broken hinges. One detective laughed quietly while scrolling through civilian complaint photos on his phone beside another officer who barely looked old enough to shave. Naomi stopped near the center of the bullpen where an old city map covered an entire corkboard wall. Colored pushpins marked gang territories, overdose clusters, robbery patterns. Several sections had not been updated in months. She studied the boards silently while tension thickened behind her. Ryan Keller remained near the front desk, jaw tight, arms folded across his chest like he was trying to hold together whatever authority had slipped through his fingers during the last 5 minutes. Mike Doyle leaned against a filing cabinet pretending calm, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. Upstairs, through the glass-enclosed offices overlooking the bullpen, silhouettes moved behind closed blinds. Word was already spreading. Naomi could feel it moving through the building faster than any radio call. Internal affairs transfer. New captain. Brooks. The name alone carried history inside these walls. Some older officers remembered her father. Some remembered the investigation that buried him. Some remembered choosing silence when it mattered. Naomi turned toward the row of framed photographs lining the hallway beside the lieutenant offices. Decades of retirement ceremonies, academy graduations, community events. Mostly white faces smiling beneath fluorescent lights. Near the far end sat a faded group picture from 17 years earlier. Naomi stopped walking. Her father stood in the second row wearing dress blues, one hand resting lightly on another officer's shoulder while smiling toward the camera. Officer Daniel Brooks, the only black patrol officer in the photograph. Dust clung to the frame corners. The glass carried a long crack across one side that nobody had bothered to repair. Naomi stared at it for a moment longer than she intended. That picture should have been replaced years ago. A voice muttered quietly behind her. Naomi turned slightly. The speaker was an older dispatcher named Linda Perez, sitting near the communications desk with reading glasses low on her nose and gray curls tucked behind one ear. Unlike everyone else tonight, Linda did not look nervous. She looked tired. "Your father was a good man," she said softly before returning her eyes to the radio console. Naomi nodded once, but said nothing. The station lights hummed overhead while rain continued tapping softly against the narrow windows near the ceiling. Somewhere down the hallway, a drunk suspect shouted from holding before another officer told him to settle down. Business as usual, at least on the surface. But beneath the noise, Precinct 18 carried another rhythm Naomi recognized immediately. Fear disguised as loyalty. Power disguised as order. Officers protecting each other instead of the city. Complaint reports disappearing. Excessive force reviews delayed until witnesses gave up. Internal investigations closed before they began. Naomi had spent the last 6 years uncovering patterns exactly like these across Chicago. Tonight she was standing inside one of the worst of them. Ryan finally approached from behind, slower now, less certain. "Captain," he said carefully, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. Naomi turned toward him fully. Ryan hesitated before speaking again. "Chief Alvarez is on his way." Naomi looked at him steadily beneath the cold station lights. "Good," she answered quietly. "Because we need to talk about what kind of place this precinct has become." The tension inside Precinct 18 shifted the moment the front doors opened again. Cold wind swept rainwater across the tile floor as 2 patrol officers escorted in a thin Latino teenager wearing a soaked gray hoodie and handcuffs loose around his wrists. He could not have been older than 16. His sneakers squeaked against the floor with every nervous step. One officer carried a plastic evidence bag holding spray paint cans while the other kept a firm grip on the boy's shoulder like he expected him to run at any second. "Caught him tagging the underpass near West Monroe," one of the officers announced casually toward the bullpen. "Kid gave us attitude the whole ride." The teenager lowered his eyes immediately as several officers laughed under their breath. Naomi watched quietly from beside the old city map. The boy's hoodie sleeves were pulled halfway over his trembling hands. Rainwater dripped steadily from his curls onto the floor beneath him. Ryan Keller barely glanced over. "Put him in holding until juvenile intake opens in the morning," he muttered while signing paperwork near the front desk. The boy finally spoke, voice small beneath the noise of the station. "I told them I got separated from my little brother." One officer rolled his eyes. "Yeah, and I told him I am the mayor." More laughter. Naomi stepped forward before anyone else could answer. "Where is your brother?" she asked calmly. The room quieted slightly. The teenager looked up at her carefully, uncertain now after everything he had already witnessed tonight. "At the bus stop near Franklin," he said. "He got scared when they stopped us. He ran." Naomi studied his face for a moment. Not defiant. Not dangerous. Just exhausted. She looked toward the patrol officer holding the evidence bag. "How old is the brother?" 10, the teenager answered quickly. "He does not know the neighborhood." Ryan exhaled impatiently. "Captain, with respect, this kid vandalized city property." Naomi turned toward him slowly. "With respect, Officer Keller, a 10-year-old alone downtown at midnight during a thunderstorm concerns me more than spray paint." The station fell silent again. Naomi walked toward the teenager and gently adjusted the handcuffs lower where the metal had twisted awkwardly against his sleeves during transport. Her movements stayed professional, careful, practiced. "What is your name?" she asked. "Mateo," he answered quietly. Naomi nodded once. "Mateo, look at me." He did. "You are going to help us find your brother." "Understood." The fear in his eyes softened just slightly. Behind them, Ryan shifted uncomfortably while several younger officers exchanged uncertain looks. Naomi turned toward the bullpen. "Does anybody have a recent patrol grid for Franklin and West Monroe?" Nobody moved at first. Then Emily, the young desk clerk, hurried toward a filing cabinet near dispatch. Naomi accepted the map she handed over and spread it across the front counter beneath the fluorescent lights. Rain hammered harder against the windows now, flashing red and blue reflections across the paper. "There is an all-night convenience store here," Naomi said while tracing a route with one finger. "If the boy got scared, he probably looked for light and shelter." One rookie officer nodded slowly. "There is also a bus terminal 2 blocks south." Naomi looked at him. "Good. Take Unit 12 and check both." Ryan folded his arms tightly. "Captain, this is unnecessary. Juvenile outreach can handle it in the morning." Naomi met his eyes directly. "Calm again." "Too calm. A frightened 10-year-old alone in this weather becomes our responsibility now, not tomorrow morning." The words landed harder than shouting would have. Even the old radiator beside the holding cells seemed louder afterward. Ryan looked away first. Naomi handed the map back to the rookie officer. "Go," she said quietly. The officer moved immediately. No hesitation this time. As the station doors opened again and cold rain swept through the lobby, Mateo stared at Naomi with the cautious disbelief of someone unaccustomed to adults slowing down long enough to care. 20 minutes later, the rain had not slowed. Water streamed down the station windows in crooked silver lines, while the old fluorescent lights flickered softly above the bullpen. Naomi stood near dispatch reviewing intake reports when the front doors burst open again, and 2 rookie officers hurried inside, with a soaked little boy wrapped in an oversized Chicago Cubs jacket. The child looked terrified. His sneakers left muddy footprints across the floor as he scanned the station wildly, until his eyes landed on Mateo near the holding desk. "Luis," Mateo breathed. The boy broke into tears immediately. Naomi crouched beside him before anyone else could move too quickly. "Hey," she said gently. "You are safe now." Luis clung to his brother's hoodie with both hands, shaking from cold and fear. One rookie officer removed his cap and exhaled hard. Captain was right. He admitted quietly toward nobody in particular. Kid was hiding behind the bus terminal vending machines. Naomi guided the brothers toward a bench near the radiator where warm air hummed softly through rusted vents. Emily hurried over with hot chocolate from the break room, while Linda Perez searched through a drawer for dry blankets left over from winter outreach kits. The atmosphere inside the station had shifted again. Not softer exactly, just uncertain. Officers who had ignored Naomi an hour earlier now watched every decision she made. Ryan Keller noticed it too. His expression darkened with every passing minute. Control inside Precinct 18 had always depended on routine, on silence, on people knowing their place. Naomi disrupted that simply by standing still and paying attention. Mateo wrapped one blanket around his little brother carefully while Luis held the steaming paper cup between trembling hands. "Thank you," the boy whispered toward Naomi. She smiled faintly for the first time all night. "You scared your brother pretty badly," she told him gently. Luis lowered his eyes. "I thought the police were going to take him away." The words settled heavily into the room. A few officers looked down immediately. Naomi glanced briefly toward Ryan before returning her attention to the brothers. "Not tonight," she said quietly. The station doors opened once more as Chief Daniel Alvarez entered carrying Rain across the lobby floor with him. He was tall, silver-haired, and visibly exhausted from years spent managing crises no press conference could fix. The moment officers spotted him, backs straightened automatically. Alvarez removed his wet overcoat slowly while taking in the atmosphere around the bullpen. His eyes moved from Naomi to Ryan to the 2 frightened boys sitting near the radiator. He understood instantly that something had already happened here tonight. "Captain Brooks," he said carefully. Naomi stood. "Chief." Alvarez approached her beneath the harsh overhead lights, while several officers pretended not to listen. "I expected your transfer briefing tomorrow morning," he muttered quietly. "I changed my arrival time," Naomi answered. Alvarez gave the faintest nod. Then his attention shifted toward the red mark still visible along Naomi's cheek beneath the station lights. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Ryan noticed. So did everybody else. "My office," Alvarez said finally. "Now." Ryan stepped forward immediately. "Chief, before this gets misunderstood." Alvarez raised one hand without looking at him. Silence. Complete silence. Even dispatch traffic seemed quieter. Naomi followed Alvarez upstairs toward the glass offices overlooking the bullpen, while every pair of eyes tracked them. Ryan remained standing near the front desk with his jaw locked tight enough to show through the muscles in his face. Mike Doyle stared at the floor beside him. Nobody laughed anymore. Through the upstairs office windows, shadows moved behind partially closed blinds while thunder rolled low across downtown Chicago. Downstairs, Luis slowly leaned against his brother's shoulder and finally stopped shaking. Linda Perez watched the staircase for a long moment before speaking softly under her breath. "Feels different tonight," she murmured. Emily glanced toward Naomi's office upstairs where light glowed faintly through the blinds. "Yeah," she whispered back. "Like somebody finally turned the lights on." Chief Alvarez's office overlooked the bullpen through wide glass panels streaked with rainwater and city grime. The lights inside remained low except for a green banker's lamp resting near the edge of the desk, casting a warm circle across stacks of unfinished reports and old disciplinary files. Naomi stood near the window with her coat finally removed, revealing a dark navy blouse beneath still damp from the storm outside. Beyond the glass, officers moved through the station below like shadows under fluorescent light. Nobody downstairs laughed anymore. Alvarez closed the office door carefully behind them before loosening his tie with one tired hand. For a long moment he said nothing. The only sounds came from distant dispatch chatter and rain tapping softly against the windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Naomi watched the reflections of patrol lights ripple across the glass. "Red. Blue. Red again. You always did arrive quietly," Alvarez said at last. Naomi glanced toward him. "Quiet lets people show you who they are." Alvarez exhaled slowly at that. His face carried the weight of too many years spent trying to hold together a department already cracking from inside. "Ryan Keller has been here 14 years, he muttered. "Decorated officer. Strong arrest numbers. Union support." Naomi's eyes remained on the city outside. "And 23 civilian complaints." Alvarez looked up sharply. Naomi continued calmly. 9 excessive force reviews. For internal conduct investigations. 3 witnesses who later withdrew statements. The office fell silent again. "You memorized his file already?" Alvarez asked quietly. Naomi finally turned from the window. "I memorized this precinct 6 months ago." Thunder rolled low across the skyline, shaking the glass faintly. Downstairs, Mateo and Luis sat asleep together near the radiator wrapped in department blankets while Linda Perez worked dispatch beside them. Naomi noticed the scene through the office window, and her expression softened almost invisibly. "Most people walk into a station and see badges," she said quietly. "Kids like those boys walk in and see danger." Alvarez followed her gaze downward. "You think this place can still change?" Naomi took a long breath before answering. "It has to." The green lamp reflected softly against the faint mark still visible along her cheek. Alvarez noticed it again and his jaw tightened. "You could file formal conduct charges tonight," he said carefully. "Nobody upstairs would stop you." Naomi looked back toward him. "That would be easy." Easy is not always wrong. Naomi stepped closer to the desk slowly. "My father spent years trying to punish people into becoming better officers." Her voice stayed calm, but something older lived beneath it now. All it did was teach them how to hide. Rain slid down the office windows in crooked lines while the station below continued humming with restless midnight energy. Alvarez studied her quietly. "You still carry him with you," he said. Naomi lowered her eyes briefly toward the old wooden floor beneath her shoes. "Every day." For a moment neither of them spoke. The city outside glowed cold and distant beneath the storm clouds. Somewhere nearby, a train horn echoed through downtown streets slick with rain. Naomi walked toward the wall beside Alvarez's desk, where framed commendations hung beside photographs from decades of department ceremonies. One picture showed a much younger Alvarez standing beside Daniel Brooks at a community fundraiser nearly 20 years earlier. Both men smiling, both believing something different about the future back then. Naomi touched the edge of the frame gently with 2 fingers. He believed this badge meant people would feel safe when they saw you coming. She whispered. Alvarez looked down heavily. Your father was a better man than most of us deserved. The words lingered quietly between them. Downstairs, Ryan Keller stood alone near the booking desk staring at his own reflection in the dark station windows. Naomi noticed him through the glass. So did Alvarez. What happens next? He asked carefully. Naomi remained still for a long moment before answering. Tomorrow morning, she said softly, they are going to learn this precinct belongs to the community again. By 6:30 the next morning the storm had finally passed, but the city still looked washed in cold gray light outside the station windows. Downtown Chicago moved slowly beneath low clouds and puddles reflecting red traffic signals along empty streets. Inside Precinct 18, the overnight exhaustion lingered in the air like stale coffee. Officers drifted through morning shift change quieter than usual, exchanging cautious looks every time Naomi Brooks crossed the bullpen floor carrying a stack of personnel files beneath one arm. Nobody knew exactly what to expect from her anymore. That uncertainty unsettled people more than anger would have. Mateo and Luis had been picked up safely by an aunt just before sunrise. Before leaving, Luis had hugged Naomi so quickly and unexpectedly that even Ryan Keller looked away afterward. Now the station felt strangely hollow without the boys sitting near the radiator. Naomi stood beside the conference room windows reviewing complaint records while early sunlight pushed weakly through the glass. Dust floated through the pale beams of light cutting across the long wooden table where officers normally held briefing meetings. Every chair was occupied now. Ryan sat near the center beside Mike Doyle, both unusually silent in freshly pressed uniforms. Rookie officers lined the far wall holding coffee cups they barely touched. Chief Alvarez remained near the back of the room with folded arms, watching everything carefully. Naomi closed the final personnel file and looked around the room slowly. No speech notes, no dramatic entrance, just silence long enough for everyone to feel their own discomfort settling in. Some of you already decided who I am, she said calmly. Her voice carried evenly through the room without effort. Last night confirmed that. Nobody moved. Naomi continued. You saw a black woman walk into this building alone after midnight and made assumptions before asking a single question. Ryan lowered his eyes briefly toward the conference table. Naomi noticed, but kept speaking. That is not just about me. That is how this precinct has treated half the neighborhood for years. A low hum from the overhead lights filled the brief silence afterward. Naomi placed several folders onto the table one by one. Civilian complaint reports, internal review summaries, missing evidence notices. Over the last 3 years, she said quietly, this precinct received more misconduct complaints than any station in the district. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Naomi opened one file carefully. Most were dismissed before investigation. Another file. Some witnesses disappeared from reports entirely. Another. And some complaints were signed by people too afraid to walk back into this building afterward. Ryan's jaw tightened harder with every sentence. Naomi looked directly at him now. Last night a 10-year-old boy believed police officers would take his brother away instead of helping him. The room remained perfectly still. That did not happen because of one bad night, Naomi said softly. That happened because fear became normal here. Chief Alvarez watched Ryan carefully from the back wall, but said nothing. Naomi closed the final folder. Starting today, every civilian complaint will be reviewed publicly by command staff. Murmurs spread quietly across the room. Body camera failures will trigger automatic investigation. More silence. And effective immediately, Officer Ryan Keller and Sergeant Mike Doyle are reassigned from field supervision pending conduct review. Mike looked up sharply. Ryan stayed motionless for one long second before standing slowly from his chair. Captain, he said carefully, voice tight beneath forced control. You are making assumptions based on one misunderstanding. Naomi met his eyes calmly. No, she answered. I am making decisions based on patterns. The room fell silent again. Ryan glanced briefly around the table searching for support, but nobody spoke. Not one officer moved to defend him. That realization landed visibly harder than the reassignment itself. Naomi stepped closer to the center of the room, beneath the pale morning light spilling across the conference table. "This badge does not exist to protect our pride," she said quietly. "It exists so people can walk into this building without fear." Outside the conference room windows, officers throughout the bullpen had stopped pretending not to listen. Even dispatch remained unusually quiet. Naomi looked around the room one final time before speaking again. "You do not have to like me," she said. "But this precinct is going to earn trust again. Starting now." 3 weeks later, the atmosphere inside Precinct 18 no longer felt like the same building Naomi Brooks had walked into during that stormy midnight shift. The fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. The coffee still tasted burnt. The old radiator near dispatch still clanged every morning around 7:15 like it had for 20 years. But something underneath the noise had changed. People looked up now when civilians entered the station. Officers introduced themselves instead of barking orders across counters. Complaint forms no longer disappeared into desk drawers. Some habits changed slowly. Others changed because everyone understood somebody was finally paying attention. Naomi stood near the front windows reviewing patrol schedules while weak autumn sunlight filtered through the glass and stretched pale gold across the station floor. Outside, downtown Chicago moved beneath cold blue skies washed clean after days of rain. Across the bullpen, Emily laughed quietly with Linda Perez while helping an elderly man complete a stolen property report. The sound caught Naomi off guard for a moment. Genuine laughter had become rare in this building long before she arrived. Ryan Keller entered from the rear hallway carrying a stack of community outreach flyers beneath one arm. His reassignment had stripped away the swagger that once followed him through every room. He looked older now somehow, quieter. For the past 3 weeks, Naomi had required him to attend every civilian complaint hearing in person, every grieving mother, every frightened teenager, every exhausted store owner describing nights they stopped calling police because nobody came unless things got worse. At first, Ryan sat through those meetings stiff-armed and defensive, answering questions with clipped professionalism while avoiding eye contact. But little by little, the stories reached him. Naomi saw it happen gradually, a shoulder lowering, a voice softening, the realization that authority sounded different when heard from the other side of the desk. Ryan stopped near dispatch and glanced toward the front entrance where a young black mother struggled to hold the station door open while balancing groceries and a sleeping toddler against her shoulder. Before anyone else reacted, Ryan crossed the lobby and held the door for her carefully. "Take your time," he said quietly. The woman looked startled for half a second before offering a cautious thank you. Naomi watched the exchange silently from across the bullpen. Ryan noticed her afterward and hesitated awkwardly. The old version of him would have ignored the moment completely. This version walked toward her slowly instead. "Captain," he muttered. Naomi closed the patrol folder in her hands. Ryan shifted uneasily beneath the station lights. "I finished the outreach packets for Saturday's youth program." Naomi nodded once. "Good." Ryan looked down briefly before speaking again. "I also reviewed those old complaint reports you assigned." His voice carried none of the bitterness from before, only fatigue. Some of those people were right. Naomi studied him carefully without answering immediately. Around them, the station continued moving through another ordinary afternoon shift. Phones ringing, printers humming, officers moving between desks. But Ryan's next words came softer than anything she had ever heard from him. "I think I stopped seeing people after a while," he admitted quietly. "Just saw problems, threats, paperwork." Naomi remained still for a long moment. Sunlight reflected faintly across the polished badge on her chest. "That happens when fear becomes culture," she said calmly. Ryan nodded slowly. "Does not excuse it, though." For the first time since that first night, Naomi saw something honest settle across his face. Shame without defensiveness. Regret without performance. Ryan glanced toward the front lobby where the young mother now filled out paperwork while gently rocking her sleeping child. "I spent 14 years thinking respect came from control," he said quietly. "Turns out people trust you more when they feel seen." Naomi looked at him steadily beneath the warm afternoon light spilling through the station windows. Then, finally, she gave the faintest nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Ryan understood the difference. Outside, Wind carried dry autumn leaves along the sidewalk, while squad cars rolled slowly through streets that finally felt just a little less afraid. Winter arrived early that year in Chicago. By mid-November, thin sheets of frost clung to the station windows every morning, and people hurried through downtown streets with shoulders tucked against the wind blowing off Lake Michigan. Inside Precinct 18, warm yellow lights spilled across the lobby floor, while the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the bullpen during the start of another evening shift. The station no longer felt cold in the same way it once had. Community flyers covered the front bulletin board now beside missing pet notices and youth basketball schedules. A toy donation bin sat near dispatch, overflowing with stuffed animals and winter coats waiting for neighborhood families before Christmas. Naomi Brooks paused near the front entrance after finishing her patrol briefing, one hand resting lightly against the strap of her shoulder bag, while snow flurries drifted softly outside beneath the streetlights. Across the room, officers prepared for shift change with quieter voices than the station used to carry months earlier. Nobody noticed Ryan Keller at first as he crossed the bullpen, holding 2 cups of coffee carefully balanced in one hand. He stopped near Linda Perez's desk and set one beside her keyboard. "Extra cream this time," he said awkwardly. Linda looked genuinely surprised before smiling faintly. "Look at you learning." Ryan shook his head with a small laugh under his breath and kept walking. The change still looked unfamiliar on him, but no longer impossible. Near the community board, a group of neighborhood kids bundled in winter jackets waited excitedly beside Officer Emily Carter for the station's annual holiday toy drive. One little boy pointed toward Naomi immediately. "That is the captain," he whispered proudly to another child like he was introducing somebody famous. Naomi pretended not to hear, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. Months ago, children rarely smiled inside these walls. Now they colored pictures at the front desk, while officers helped carry donated bicycles into storage rooms downstairs. Naomi stepped toward the old photograph wall near the hallway leading to command offices. The cracked frame holding her father's picture had finally been repaired last week. Fresh glass, clean edges. Someone had even polished the brass nameplate beneath it. Officer Daniel Brooks. Naomi stood quietly in front of the photograph, while soft station noise echoed behind her. Her father's smile in the picture looked exactly as she remembered. Warm, steady. Certain people could still become better than their worst instincts. Snow tapped gently against the front windows while squad cars rolled slowly past outside under red traffic lights glowing through the evening haze. "He would be proud of you." Naomi turned slightly. Chief Alvarez stood a few feet away holding his winter coat over one arm. His voice stayed soft enough not to interrupt the stillness surrounding the photograph. Naomi looked back toward her father's picture for a long moment before answering. "I hope he would be proud of all of us." Alvarez nodded quietly at that. Across the bullpen, Ryan opened the station door for an elderly black woman struggling with grocery bags while 2 rookie officers hurried over to help her out of the cold. Nobody acted like it was extraordinary. That was the point. Naomi watched the moment through the reflection in the photograph glass. Simple kindness. No applause. No speeches. Just people finally remembering what the badge was supposed to mean. The station lights hummed softly overhead, while snow continued falling outside across the Chicago streets her father once walked patrol every night. Naomi adjusted her coat and slowly headed toward the front doors. Officers throughout the bullpen straightened instinctively as she passed, not from fear now, but respect honestly earned. Naomi paused briefly beneath the glowing station sign near the entrance before stepping outside into the cold winter air. Snowflakes drifted across her dark coat as city lights shimmered along the wet pavement ahead. Behind her, through the station windows, the precinct glowed warm against the night like something finally healing.